Now, all this started because we were talking about this statement where there's no salvation outside of the church, right? And we already said that Cyprian here, who says that we must all unite in the church and we must obey the bishops, he's quoting Cyprian. Cyprian elsewhere, as we're about to read, says that we have to flee from evil bishops and evil priests. And he was an example of that. He even contradicted the Bishop of Rome, Pope Stephen, and said that he was in heresy when Stephen wanted to accept heretical baptisms. So this is quite ironic, isn't it? That Cyprian, the one they're relying on here, at another time says we must flee from evil priests, and Cyprian absolutely endorses having the Eucharist apart from priests and baptizing apart from priests. How do we know that? And by the way, guys, as I was just saying to you, Ray, it's an amazing thing that if I quote Cyprian on the subject of the church's unity, the Cathodox will say, Amen. But if I quote Cyprian saying the whole church will fall away someday and that we must flee sinful heretical priests and have the Eucharist by ourselves, then they'll say, Cyprian's an idiot. So let's see then what Cyprian actually says. Let's see. All right, we've read this quote many times, guys, but this is Cyprian's big letter 67 where he says, nor let the people flatter themselves that they can be free from the contagion of sin while communicating, meaning having communion, with a priest who is a sinner and yielding their consent to the unjust and unlawful episcopacy of their overseer, when the divine reproof by Hosea the prophet threatens and says, their sacrifices shall be as the bread of morning, all that eat thereof shall be polluted, teaching manifestly and showing that all are absolutely bound to the sin who have been contaminated by the sacrifice of a profane and unrighteous priest, which moreover we find to be manifested also in Numbers, when Korah and Dathan and Abiram claimed for themselves the power of sacrificing in opposition to Aaron the priest. Guys, he's talking about actually validly ordained bishops, and he's saying, no, their sacrifices are not legitimate, because they're sinful and they're heretical and they oppose the church with their heresies. Therefore, their ordination means nothing. He says, there also the Lord commanded by Moses that the people should be separated from them, lest being associated with the wicked, themselves also should be bound closely in the same wickedness. Separate yourselves, said he, from the tents of these wicked and hardened men, and touch not those things which belong to them, lest you perish together in their sins. On which account, a people obedient to the Lord's precepts and fearing God ought to separate themselves from a sinful prelate, and not associate themselves with the sacrifices of a sacrilegious priest, especially since they themselves have the power either of choosing worthy priests or of rejecting unworthy ones. So you see, guys, he's telling us to get away from heretical priests. The Catholics and Orthodox do not teach this doctrine. They teach that you must obey your priest in whatever town you live in. You need to go to his parish, obey everything he says. Don't worry about his sacrifices. It's okay if he's a sinner or a heretic. And we're not even just talking about contradicting the early church's doctrines, guys. We're talking like even if he contradicts the Orthodox churches or the Catholic church's current teachings, you should still go to that guy and have communion with him. And you're not polluted. Not until he's like officially excommunicated by the church. Then you have to stay away from him. But you can actually just know that he's a pedophile or whatever. You just keep on having the Eucharist with him. It's fine, because he's ordained. For them, it's all about the ordination. Okay, and Cyprian continues. They want us to listen to Cyprian. Let's listen to Cyprian. Cyprian doesn't contradict himself. He's completely consistent. I'll even show you that quote from On the Unity of the Church, where even when he says we must all stay with the bishops, he says the reason we stay with all the priests is because the priests agree with each other. But if the priests don't agree with each other, then you don't stay with the priests who are falling away from the rest. He says, for which reason you must diligently observe and keep the practice delivered from divine tradition and apostolic observance, which is also maintained among us and almost throughout all the provinces. Nor let it disturb you, dearest brethren, if with some in these last times either an uncertain faith is wavering, or a fear of God without religion is vacillating, or a peaceable concord does not continue. These things have been foretold as about to happen in the end of the world, and it was predicted by the voice of the Lord and by the testimony of the apostles, that now that the world is failing and the Antichrist is drawing near, everything good shall fail, but evil and adverse things shall prosper. Now, what does he mean by everything good shall fail? Well, he just told you. What's the subject here? Bishops falling away from the faith. That's the subject. He says, don't be surprised. Don't let it disturb you, brethren. These things were predicted as about to happen. Everything good shall fail. And he is talking about eventually a point being reached where there are no more bishops. How do we know that? Because of what he says next. He says, yet although in these last times evangelic rigor has not so failed in the church of God, nor the strength of Christian virtue or faith so languished, that there is not left a portion of the priests which in no respect give way under these ruins of things and wrecks of faith, but bold and steadfast they maintain the honor of the divine majesty and the priestly dignity with full observance of fear. So he says they've got a portion of priests still obeying in the late 200s. But Cyprian is very disturbed. He sees that this church is falling away, and he sees that this was predicted to happen. And guys, if he's saying this in the late 200s, he absolutely would say that the whole church has fallen away if he could see where they are right now. He would absolutely say that. There is no doubt. Now let's answer this question. Let's answer this question of whether he would approve of people having the Eucharist and baptizing without the priests. Let's see. Let's see if we can find a quote where he says that. Are you guys still with me?
Yep.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, here's Tertullian. This is Tertullian. Now you guys may be asking, why Tertullian? Well, I'll tell you in just a second. First, we're going to read Tertullian.